Welcome to Happily Family. I'm Cecilia
And
Hilke,
I'm Jason Ilke.
and we're delighted today to have Dr. Kristin Neff with us. Kristin is an associate professor of educational psychology at the University of Texas at Austin. She's a pioneer in the field of self-compassion research, conducting the first empirical studies on self-compassion over a decade ago. Her latest book is called Fierce Self-Compassion: How Women Can Harness Kindness to Speak Up, Claim Their Power, and Thrive. With Dr. Chris Germer, she developed an empirically supported 8-week training program called Mindful Self-Compassion and offers workshops on self-compassion worldwide. Welcome, Kristin. It's great to have
Thanks for
you.
being back again,
Oh,
Kristin.
yes. Great to be back with you both. Thank you for having me.
I wanted to start because we've talked with you a couple of times before about self-compassion. What's the difference between self-compassion and fierce self-compassion?
Right. So, fierce self-compassion is, you might say, a flavor of self-compassion and an expression of it. So, self-compassion is concern with the alleviation of our own suffering, this desire to help ourselves, to be well, to be there for ourselves in a caring way. And that can take two forms, tender or fierce. Tender is about accepting ourselves as people. Fierce is about changing, taking action, not about ourselves as people, but some of our behaviors or situations that are causing harm. So self-compassion is both about acceptance and change. So the fierce side is more about the action-oriented change energy of self-compassion. Tender is more about the accepting side of self-compassion. Both are central.
Nice. And then how do gender roles play into self-compassion?
Yeah, so this is a problem. So if you think about yin and yang, the Chinese philosophy of yin and yang, which is so brilliant, the idea that we need to balance yin and yang. That's why we see that symbol that the two are in balance. So the yin energy of life is kind of that more gentle, tender, accepting energy of life. The yang energy is more that, fierce, action-oriented energy of life. To be healthy, we need to balance acceptance and change. The reason it's hard to balance these is because gender role socialization stands in the way of balance and integration. So people who are raised to be boys are told to be fierce. They can be, action-oriented, agentic, do things. They can be, very boisterous if they want. But if they're too tender, they get called names. And in a really oppressive way, people who are raised to be boys who are too sensitive or emotional, they're shut down, they're called names, they're bullied often. And that really restricts the emotional range of boys. People who are raised to be girl on the other, and I'm saying people who are raised, just to make clear, I'm not talking about biological sex, but gender role socialization. People who are socialized to be girls, they're allowed to be tender and nurturing toward others, right? The whole idea of being self-sacrificing, being helpful, being a good little girl, being a good woman is about helping others. They aren't supposed to do that for themselves because that's selfish. And they aren't supposed to be too powerful, too fierce. They aren't supposed to get angry. They aren't supposed to really embody this, except maybe when protecting their children. That's the only time they're giving an exception. But people don't like really powerful, competent women, which is partly why we have the glass ceiling in the business world, because people don't like it when women are too powerful and competent and agentic. And so that harms women because it first of all, reduces their power. And it means that they don't have the same resources available to help themselves as people raised to be boys. But the bottom line is it harms everyone. Health is about integrating yin and yang, fierce and tenderness, really owning both sides, acceptance and change. And that's why self-compassion is it's a radical act, it's a political act in many ways, because it's saying, I don't care how you think I should be, society. This is the real me. This is authentic for me. This is what's true for me. And this is what's healthy for me. And that's what self-compassion gives us.
So it's interesting as you're saying that. It reminds me of a conversation I was just having yesterday, I think. We were talking about, I don't know, a friend's daughter, and she's really she's young, and she really says what she wants, and she's really kind of active and assertive. And I had that instance of wanting to just kind of make an off the cuff kind of comment of she's kind of bossy, and it's immediately I caught myself. And I think that's something that we would not say about a
You
boy.
wouldn't say for a boy, he's not bossy, he's great, he's strong. Girls are called bossy, they're called other B words. right? The same with the boys who are kind of sensitive emotionally, like we kind of don't like it. And the thing about these gender roles stereotypes is they run deep and they're unconscious. And so you weren't aware, luckily you caught yourself, but most people aren't aware that, oh, I'm thinking that because she's a girl. They just think, oh, she's bossy. And so a really important part of self-compassion is like uncovering these filters, and compassion for others is uncovering these unconscious filters and really asking yourself, would I think the same thing of this person if they had a different gender identity? What's human versus what's society's prescriptions for how we're supposed to be, which may or may not make us happy.
So then I think of this in two different ways as we're talking about this in the context of parenting. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about this. Like we're touching a little bit here about raising kids in what we were just saying. And I'm also wondering if we could talk, if you can talk more about that for us, and also talk to us a little bit about like, how can we as a parent, like the adult part of us, how can we apply that to our lives? How does that play out for us as an adult parent?
So really great questions. So for kids, I would say that it's important to try to be aware of how you might be unconsciously oppressing your children by expecting them to be a certain way. Now, I do have to say there is some pragmatic aspect to this. So the fact what the research shows, let's say for girls, if they're really agentic and fierce and they don't show any of their tender qualities, it may work against them, especially in the workplace. And so what they find, as long as a girl who's very strong and powerful also shows some stereotypical tender qualities like, oh, how are you doing? Or how is your dog? Something kind of more gentle, people are okay with the fierceness. Boys, they can be just fierce, but if boys are too tender without also showing some of the fierce qualities, that works against them. So as parents, we want to accept our kids as they are. At the same time, one of the reasons it's important to help our kids find balance is not only because we need balance inside, but it actually helps in people's reactions to you if you show the balance of qualities. Most people are okay with boys being a little sensitive if they're also kind of, strong and agentic, and they're also okay with girls being strong and agentic if they're also sensitive. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we want to help our kids develop both, not only for their own internal, so they have the resources of both, because both have the tender self-compassion is really important for emotional healing, emotional intelligence. The fierce self-compassion is important for like motivation, getting things done, making sure, you achieve your goals, that you're happy. So we really want our kids to have both. But if they display it outwardly as well, it will help other people's reactions to them. So that's with your kids. With ourselves, this really comes up in the gender roles of parents themselves, right? I mean, just think how much gender role socialization there is that still operates. So we know that women, even though they're pretty much now, the statistics are most of them work just as much as the males, maybe not bringing in quite as much money because of the gender pay gap, but many are. Women still do most of that childcare and housework, elder care, things like, they call it emotional labor, thinking of birthdays, etc. And so as parents, not only for ourselves, but also as models for our children, I think it's also really important to ask ourselves, are we restricting ourselves? So as a father, am I restricting myself by cutting myself off with some of the joys of spending time with my kids or planning the birthday parties? Or, showing how I care by helping to take care of the house. Am I restricting myself? Am I being unfair? Also for, women or people who are the mothers, learning to draw boundaries. It can be hard for women, especially, to draw boundaries because people don't like it when we draw boundaries. They like us a lot better when we say yes to everything. Oh, sure, it'd be happy to help you. Yes, I will make all the cupcakes for the party, and that harms us, right? And this is just gender role socialization operating. By the way, some couples will decide to divide the labor in a way that works for them. There's no right or wrong. It's just that the ideal is for people to do what works for them, what's authentic for them, or as a couple or as a family. So some families, the man has decided to do most of the care and stay at home. That can work great as long as everyone's on board. So it's just really making the unconscious conscious. Because again, passion means the suffer in the Latin, come means with. How are we with our suffering? Can we be with our suffering, our pain, our distress, our stress in a way that's healthy and helpful as opposed to harmful? And part of doing that is becoming aware of all the ways maybe we aren't able to be our true authentic selves that we don't even realize are operating. So that's why it's important to look at things like gender and all the other forms of oppression, ableism, sexism, racism, you start going down the line. A lot of people think compassion is just an inside job, but social justice or just justice in general is part of it because injustice causes a tremendous amount of suffering to ourselves and others.
Yeah.
I'm still stuck on the way you just broke down compassion, and just thinking about that just hit me really hard about like, how are we with our suffering?
Yes.
And that's,
do we ignore it? Are we stiff upper lipping it? Are we blaming other people for it? Are we blaming ourselves for it? Are we warm, caring, supportive for it? What's really interesting, and this will interest you too, and I think I've talked about this before, is self-compassion. One way to look at it is being an ideally compassionate parent to yourself. And so the people who follow you two or listen to you all are really interested in how do I be a really good, effective, compassionate, caring, supportive parent because I love my kids so much. Part of that journey is also making sure that you're also warm, supportive, caring, effective with yourself, kind of you're meeting your own needs the way maybe you didn't have the luxury of having ultimately compassionate parents, but you can learn to meet your own needs to help yourself to be there for yourself, just like a really compassionate parent would. And when you do that, especially when you do that out loud, you're modeling for your children the way we need to be with ourselves. If you say in front of your kids, "Oh, I'm such an idiot because I forgot this," your kid's getting the message, "Oh, geez, I'm supposed to say I'm such an idiot. That's the right way to be." Whereas if you model, "Hey, it's okay to make mistakes. It's only human. How can I fix this situation?" Then you're modeling that compassionate, supportive attitude is the healthier way to be.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. So I've been reading your book about fierce self-compassion, and one of the images that I've held onto is the image of the mama bear.
Yes.
That like fiercely protects the babies.
That's right. Fierce mom. And by the way, and it doesn't matter if you have kids or not, or what your gender identity is. This is like a force, this protective energy for something that we love. And it's great that it is a female metaphor, but fierce mom bear energy. And we all have it inside of us, but sometimes we don't realize we can tap into it intentionally. And that's part of what the book's about. How do we intentionally tap into this fierce protective energy, which is like, you can see, even when I talk about it, my back naturally straightens, right? You get your energy, it raises your spine, strong back, you sit tall. You kind of realize that I have the right to ask for what I need, to draw boundaries, to protect myself, to say no. I have the right to meet my own needs, not instead of yours, but in addition to yours. So we're going to come to some compromise that meets everyone's needs. This includes with our children, right? Sometimes as parents, we think, I'm only valuable if I give and give and give and give. Well, if you give to the point where you have nothing left, you weren't really good use to anyone. So with parenting, and I know I have an autistic son, so I know this well, and I probably need to give a little more than maybe parents with a neurotypical kid because, he needs a little extra help, and that's just the way it is. But I definitely take my needs into account when making decisions. I come to, yeah, well, maybe, is it all right if he spends the night alone or does it himself? Or if I don't do this, even though maybe ideally it'd be nice to, but I need to take the time for myself. I really take into account my own needs, and he sees that, right? And for instance, he's a really good self-advocate for himself. Like he'll ask for what he needs and he'll ask for, clarification, or he'll stick up for himself. I think partly, I don't know, I would hope, I don't know if that's the case. I would hope partly because he's seen me do that as well. So what we do for ourselves, not only is it good for ourselves, but it's also good in terms of modeling it for our kids.
Yeah. And I just like this, this image of mama bear. And I was holding on to that. And then it wasn't until later that I was like, oh, I can be mama bear for myself.
Yes,
Also.
exactly.
And like
You
sometimes
need to be mama bear for yourself.
totally, totally, like this energy of fierce self-compassion, it doesn't just go out. It's not, yes, it is for social justice. Yes, it is to protect my kids. Yes, it is for all these other things that I care
Yes.
about. And, being a person who works in the world and has a business and fulfilling these like deep-seated needs out there, but it's also for inside. Because sometimes when my kid says, hey, I really need you to like go to the grocery store and it's 10 p.m. and because she's having like a, heavy whipping cream catastrophe because she's made like the, I don't know, cream puffs. Sometimes I will totally get behind that and be like, yeah, let's do this. Let's have a whipped cream, like cream puff, like party at 10 p.m. And then sometimes it's really good for me to have like a mama bear for myself. It's like, no, I'm gonna go to sleep. I
Yeah.
need to.
I would love to be able to help
morning.
you, but my sleep's really important. We'll do something tomorrow, something like that. And
Yeah,
again, you really are modeling, um, especially for girls, because girls are so socialized to be valued for being self-sacrificing and saying yes. So modeling how to say no by telling your daughter no, it's a good thing. You do
yeah,
it kindly, you don't do it meanly if you can, but but it's actually good for both of you.
yeah. Totally. It's good for me and it's good for her,
Mhm.
and good like role modeling either way.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got a little bit of a I don't know if this is off topic around it, but what I wonder as a partner in
Yeah.
parenting, how can we support each other in this type of fierce compassion?
Yeah. So by the way, a colleague of mine, Michelle Becker, has this great program, Self-Compassion for Couples. And so she has really found in her work um, that if each partner in a relationship help each other, support each other in their self-compassion practice, it just makes it that much stronger because it's hard to remember. I mean, we have our old conditioning and we get caught up in our lives. If each partner kind of commits to helping the other have self-compassion, including that means you have to give up that, maybe you would have liked to manipulate your partner to feel guilty about something. So she does something for you. If you're committed to helping her have self-compassion and she is as well, that means really honoring up front that both of your needs are important, and that part of helping each other be the best we can be also means including helping each other have self-compassion. So is it part of what happens, and this is partly, again, the gender role socialization. We've set it up to where like we need to be in a heterosexual relationship with the man who does the fierce and the woman who does the tender historically. I'm not saying nowadays, but historically to get that wholeness. And hopefully now we're evolving to a point where we can all be whole within ourselves so that she doesn't need you to be whole. You don't need her to be whole. You know what I mean? But you're each whole. And then you come together as whole human beings who are both self-compassionate and compassionate for the other. And how many more resources you have to pool if that's the case, right? In terms of what you can accomplish in your business or as a family or as parents. If each person is coming to the table whole and not incomplete or just only half whole.
Yeah.
Like
And I think of us like being whole individuals coming together as a couple. And then I think that that's role modeling for the kids, for them to get to embrace both sides of themselves, their fierceness and their tenderness.
Yes.
Yeah. And how do we, when we're trying to work with the kids,
Yeah.
how do we give them permission to embrace maybe the opposite side if that's not coming as naturally? Do we do that explicitly?
Well, I mean, again, you don't want to like say you need a little more fierceness or you need a little more tenderness. But you may want to say you could want to try a little more compassion. Again, so how it expresses what we want it to be is to be authentic, right? We don't want to shame people for not being compassionate enough, for instance. But yeah, and I think this also goes with couples. See, sometimes what we do is we criticize ourselves in front of others because we really want compassion and we're hoping to get it, whether that's from your partner, your spouse, or from your parent, or maybe even from your child. Oh, I'm such a fool, because we really want someone to say, no, you aren't. I love you just as you are. That's kind of what we're wanting. And kids do that as well. They do that. It's a way for them to get their parents' compassion. So explicitly, again, whether it's to your spouse or your child, saying, really just saying, actually, I have compassion for you. I don't think that, but what about you? I mean, would you say that to a friend? I mean, is that true? Can you try being a little kinder, more supportive to yourself? What might that look like? Um, so my son again, he's autistic, but I would actually teach him to like try putting your hands on your heart. That really hurts, doesn't it? Or something like that. Or actually helping him explicitly say it out loud, explicitly saying, try giving yourself a break or being more supportive to yourself. Or what would you say to a friend? Can you try saying something like that to yourself? So part of our role for each other is just reminding, because our society doesn't tell us this. Our society tells us to either buy their products or to be hard on ourselves, so we buy their products. Right? Society doesn't really support self-compassion. This is suspicious of it. They think it's going to make us weak or lazy or motivated. It doesn't do any of those things. It's actually just the opposite. But we kind of have to butt society when we're being self-compassionate. And one of the ways is in a family, when we love each other, one of the ways we can help support each other is by helping each other be more self-compassionate. So for kids, I think by the time they're 7 and they're learning what it means to be a friend, start talking to your kids about being a good friend to yourself.
Yeah.
They totally get it.
Yeah. I was also thinking that of some of the things that we've done with our kids as they've been growing up. Like when we've had issues happen in our family and we're trying to work out like a win-win. And I think one kid is like kind of giving up themselves. I say, hey, it's okay. Like you don't have to give up yourself. We'll figure out a solution that works for you too. Like helping, encouraging her to have a boundary, to step forward, to say, hey, this matters.
Everyone's needs matter.
Yeah. Or recognizing when either kid does something that is like stepping out, being in action. Wow, you really stood up for your friend. You called the teacher to get help for them. You did this, you did that. And like kind of helping them own that and saying, hey, I saw you and that's okay that you acted in this way.
Right. Yeah. And that's in the positive way. And then also when maybe the kid acts out in the not so positive way, the thing of acknowledging the pain, right? It's okay to be imperfect. It hurts. I mean, it happens to everyone, and so that's kind of the tender, acknowledging the pain and acknowledging the common humanity of it. Looking at it as opposed to just turning away from it, seeing it. It's okay. It's just pain. It just felt, it's not the end of the world. And then taking the fear side is, what can we do to help the situation? Right. So these are all really good tools we can help each other learn.
So that's actually one of the questions I was going to ask about was tools. And as is typical in our relationship, Cecilia reads the books.
Yeah.
I get the highlights, and I get the opportunity to be in these interviews as well. And it's one of the ways I learn. But are there tools in the book, in your Fierce Compassion book, that you could kind of step us through a little bit, or just like exemplify one of the tools?
Yeah. So absolutely. So one tool, believe it or not, that's very powerful and very simple is a physical touch. So, or embodiment, because a lot of our emotions are really connected to our bodies. It's just evolutionarily, like our emotions are expressed in our bodies. Communicating to others, we do it primarily through touch. You can actually communicate to yourself through touch. So, for instance, if tender self-compassion is needed, right? One very easy thing is just kind of to put your hands on your heart or maybe your face, right? So you kind of drop out of here and into your body. Just it may feel a little funny at first. It may look a little funny. You may want to do this in the bathroom when no one's looking at you. But so this is a tool, physical touch. And with the fears, things like just standing up straight, rolling your shoulders back. You can even like take a little power pose if you need or something like that. So that's one way to access it on the physical level. And then really, really easy. There's 3 components to self-compassion. It's almost like how to bake a loaf of bread. There's mindfulness, common humanity, and kindness. So you bring in some mindfulness. What's happening here, right? Instead of turning away or ignoring or suppressing or fighting against, okay, this is happening. Either I'm in pain, or I'm wanting to draw a boundary, or I'm wanting to speak up for myself, whatever it is, just being mindful of what's happening. The common humanity, very important. I'm not alone, especially with kids. Kids don't have a lot of experience. They tend to think it's just them. There's something wrong with them. You aren't alone. This is part of life. This is part of being a human being. Everyone goes through this, So again, taking away that sense of isolation, it's also empowering. When you think that you're doing something, not just like it's a small, separate, isolated self, but as a human being with human rights, and then kindness. And so how does that kindness emerge? It kind of depends on what's needed, right? Kind of like, what do you need to alleviate your suffering? Maybe you need the gentle, kind, kind of soothing energy. Maybe the kindest thing to do is to speak up about something, or to draw a boundary, or to say no to someone. Sometimes you say no, sometimes you say yes to yourself, what you need. So the answer to what you need depends on the situation. But asking the question, what is it that I need, is really at the heart of self-compassion. So, and I know it seemed like a long answer. So the short answer is use some touch to support yourself, bring in mindfulness, common humanity, and kindness, and you're in the game.
Nice.
I love that. It's really nice.
As we're wrapping up, I wanted to ask, because your book is really fabulous, and you bring this your self-compassion concept and talk about what it looks like in different examples with racism, with sexual assault, with in various circumstances where people are being oppressed, social justice.
Yeah.
How do those connect? How can your self-compassion be used as a tool to address these other areas of suffering?
Yeah, well, so to be honest, one of the big inspirations, you might say, for this book was the Me Too movement. I had my own Me Too experience, and it was right at that time when women were kind of rising up as a whole to say, no, it's not okay. We aren't going to take it anymore, basically. And I realized that this was a self-compassion movement, and that so again, sometimes people think that this is self-help, self-compassion is just self-help. It's not. Believe it or not, even though the word self is there, there's not a lot of self and self-compassion. And that might be like self-pity, but self-compassion means I am just including myself in the circle of compassion. All human beings, including myself, are worthy of attention, their needs being met, rights being treated fairly. But if you do that in a self-focused way, like I'm happy, but the world around me is going to hell in a handbasket, and global warming and racism and sexism and ableism and all these other things, then it's kind of an illusion that you even could be happy when the world around you is so distressed. So really just remembering that we need to have, it's kind of this flow. It's like the ocean. It flows inward, it flows outward. Right? It's not one or the other. And an important part of being our authentic selves is making sure we also stand up for the larger human community of which we are a part. And in a way that helps us feel connected. When we're just isolated in your own little COVID pod or whatever, so as we all know, it gets a little lonely and a little depressing after a while. So, yeah, it's really self-compassion flows inward and outward. It can be accepting, it can be powerful and make change. We really need it all because, okay, a very simple way of thinking about what compassion is the ability to approach pain with love. And if you look at some of the greatest social justice leaders, people like, Reverend Martin Luther King, for instance, or Gandhi or Mother Teresa, that it was all about there's a pain in the world. It might be a pain in me, there might be a pain in the world. How do we come to it? How do we address it in a strong, in a powerful, and yet loving way? Because if we aren't loving, then we're just contributing to the problem. And I'm sorry, look at our politics, right? There's not a lot of love there, not a lot of mutual understanding, and it's tearing us apart. So the ability to approach difficulty, pain, stress, problems with a loving, open heart, it just makes us so much more powerful. And for those of you who are thinking, that's going to make me weak, I need to be closed to be tough. Maybe in a moment you need to close down just to get through it. But if you stay closed, that's going to actually prevent you from having the wisdom you need to find a good solution, right? Having your own back, if you go into battle, you're going to be stronger if you're a supportive ally to yourself than a mean, judgmental criticizer or an enemy to yourself. Clearly, you're going to be stronger, right? So helping yourself have the strength to go out in the world for yourself and also carries on to helping other people.
Yeah.
I wish we could continue to talk about this because they've just like opened up a little bit of a crack of a big topic that I think is fantastic to talk about. And we may have to have a part two about what you just started talking about there, because I think it's fantastic around the context of how we can beat up ourselves and in the process lose sight of what we're really trying to change. But
right.
I want to say, and how love can be like this very strong thing. Love
yes.
is a weak thing. Like
it's not timid, it's brave, it's courageous.
That's what I really got from your book, that you really exemplified how love is this powerful, like brave force in the world, not something strong and soft and weak.
Yes.
So I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking the time to talk.
And as parents, we know that.
Yeah.
Yes.
As parents, we know that.
The mama bear, I think, analogy is like a good example of that. Like that comes from love. As we are wrapping up, do you have any final words, or do you have a big ask that you would like to make for the audience here, of something for them to take action from this interview?
Well, maybe just to try it out. I mean, you might be thinking, oh, something makes sense. It makes sense. But if you don't try it, you'll never know for yourself. So something as simple as the next time something difficult happens in your life, just ask yourself, what would I say to a friend in this situation, or my child in this situation? Try saying it to yourself and see how it changes things. Don't take my word for it. Test it out. And you'll see it makes a radical difference in your ability to cope with challenges in life.
That's great. Really appreciate your time and your wisdom in all of this. I love how you take these complex topics and just make them so accessible for people, and how we can use them in our parenting and how we can support our kids as they grow. You have some fantastic books and resources online. How can people find out more about those?
Yeah, so the easiest thing, if you just Google self-compassion, or you can go to selfcompassion.org, but if you Google it, you'll find me. I have a website, which is like the landing place, and you can take a test to see how self-compassionate you are. You may be interested to do that. I have a lot of free guided practices. If you're into research, if you're a research nerd, I have a lot of research studies on my website. And I have links to training opportunities if you actually want to get some online training, either through me or the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion, the nonprofit I co-founded, where you can take training. So that's really the place to start.
Great. Thank you, Kristin. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us and everyone here. Look forward to talking to you again in the future, and take care of yourself. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jason and Cecilia. It was lovely talking to you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.